Let's talk about the entrepreneurial opportunity that something like this will throw off. What can you imagine in terms of that?
From the Mobility Center, the purpose is to bring under one umbrella the services that startups will need. So whether it's digital expertise or prototyping and advanced manufacturing expertise, help working through the regulatory process in the state of California, and then testing and validation, and then connecting the workforce. If you're a startup, you have to go and find each one of those things on your own. The center will provide a concierge service to take you end to end, to move you through things a lot faster and hopefully less expensive. So if you're coming through the center, we'll have negotiated contracts with all of the service providers. So you'll just move from one to the other as it's needed. You're not going to have to search for it. And that's what you're not seeing anywhere else. That's what makes it unique. You're seeing pieces of these things being done elsewhere, but there's not this wraparound service that we hope to offer.
Today is going to be a great show. I think it's going to be a great learning opportunity for me, for sure. But I think for the entrepreneurial audience, the investment audience, the Sacramentan, the people that care about our hometown. And I think a lot of us have heard of a term called the innovator's dilemma, whereby you have an existing company and eventually that company is going to be disrupted by technology. At some point, we all know the Blockbuster story. They got disrupted. But as a company, how do you decide how much of your resources to commit to a strong pivot? How do you decide how hard to try new things? And I think today we're going to address that. I have a guy that is well known in the Sacramento area. He's the CEO of SMUD. Arlen Orchard is in the house. How you doing, Arlen?
Great, Mark. Hi.
We're going to discuss this theory or this how you make the decision to pivot so hard. But I think also because SMUD is in the process of beginning a very strong pivot or redirection and some new investment into mobility. So we're going to talk about the rationale for business, but we're also going to figure out how cool this is because it's going to be a tremendous thing for Sacramento. So maybe I'll start with that, Arlen. You're the CEO of SMUD. You've been doing this for 6.5 years. Now, all of a sudden, you've made a decision to really put an investment into mobility. How did you make the decision?
So as you noted, industries get disrupted, and that disruption is happening faster and faster, and utilities aren't immune to that. We're certainly being impacted. Our business model's kind of being, knocked to the side, and we're having to figure out what the new world looks like. We're being completely driven by the need to reduce carbon, our footprint, and we're committed to reducing the footprint of our community. Closely related to what we do selling electricity is the transportation sector, which is pivoted hard towards electric transportation. And so when you think about it, we become the fuel provider of the future. And whereas you would think that utilities and transportation are two completely different things, we now really are becoming two sides of the same coin. And so it's going to impact us dramatically. On the good hand, it's going to drive new sales for us, which is fantastic. On the other hand, it's going to impact our grid very much because we're going to have to acquire new resources. It has impacts on the distribution system. So, the decision, quite frankly, is, are we going to take advantage of this, or are we just going to be responsive to it? And when I look at the future, I always figure I'm better off helping define the future than letting it just happen to me. So when we looked at this, it'll have a profound impact for them, but it's also a huge opportunity. So that's what caused us to make the pivot.
Yeah, if it's not a great opportunity, why go so hard at it? Well, let's talk just for a second about where the base business of SMUD is going. If you hadn't pivoted or you hadn't decided to make this pivot, what's the trajectory of the normal base business for SMUD?
So it's challenging. I'll just tell you, it's challenging. energy use per customer is going down, and for us that means our sales per customer go down.
Why is it going down? Is it solar?
It's part of it's solar. Part of it is just energy efficiency. We promote a lot of energy efficiency. The building standards continue to get more
Interesting
and more
how you're
tight.
promoting people to buy less from you.
We're the only industry that does that. Nobody at McDonald's doesn't say, "Don't buy a Big Mac from us."
Yeah, that's a tough position to be in. I have to imagine you're encouraging people to stop buying stuff. So a lot of us entrepreneurs it's a little bit of a struggle for us to relate to that.
And so what it does is it causes you to think differently about your business, because we're moving away from being a commodity seller, electricity, to being a service provider. So we're looking at how, we have a huge amount of data about our customers. How do we start to create new products and services that have value for them? And as you think about technology changing battery storage, for example, we're becoming a much more modular industry than a big central plant industry. So how do we start to take advantage of those things to create new value streams that we can access, while at the same time benefiting our customers and our community?
Well, SMUD's recognized as being very forward-leaning in technology, and you're ranked high. You've done, obviously we know PG&E has had their challenges, but just generally nationwide, SMUD's highly respected. I look at everything as a leadership issue, so you've done a fantastic job. But now you've made this decision, not just to dabble into new technology, but to really take what percentage of your mind share or resources do you envision like committing to the Mobility Center?
So let me give you, to the Mobility Center in particular, we have we've kind of been the early funder. We funded the feasibility study around it. We funded the initial outlay for operating costs. I've moved my new business development group over to support standing it up. And then, the Mobility Center is a public-private consortium. It's a nonprofit. It's industry-led. But at the same time, we're standing up a venture capital firm, company, corporate venture next to it, to be able to provide a value add to startups coming through the center. So we're looking at investing $15 million into that venture fund, while we continue to support the center in other ways, including doing testing and validation.
Okay, well, let's paint us a picture of the future. I think part of the job as a CEO is to help us imagine what the world might look like as everything begins to work, as our plan is achieved. Paint us a picture of what mobility looks like and the kind of world that we're going to live in at some point in the future, and maybe some of the timing that you might expect.
So the near term is about clean transportation. The state has a goal of 5 million electric vehicles on the road by 2030. That's a huge number. The Sacramento County's share of that is 200,000 EVs by then. Our goal is more like 250 by then. So we're really
250 by when is it? I'm sorry.
By 2030.
By 2030. So in 10 years, 250.
Which is an aggressive target when you think about.
Where are we at today? We're just talking electric vehicles.
We're like at 15,000 in Sacramento County.
Okay, that's it.
So it's a big lift, made bigger by the fact that people tend to keep their cars 10 to 11 years on average, and people in disadvantaged communities keep them longer. So, you really have to wait till that right time. It's not like buying a new pair of shoes, So near term, it's definitely electric transportation. The auto industry is moving in that direction aggressively. Longer term, it is autonomous vehicles, and it's really new types of thinking about how do you connect end to end. So it's shared mobility, it's improved transit. I think if you look at young people, that the concept of I need to own a car, we're seeing that start to be dented. The idea of shared mobility, whether it's a gig car or Uber on steroids, for example. I think that's more of the future, although it may be autonomous at some point.
Okay.
And based on some of the autonomous technologies I've seen, pretty exciting stuff.
So 250,000 cars in 10 years that are electric. We can all sort of get a sense. How many What percentage of the cars then will be electric that are on the road generally, would you say?
Oh, if it's 5 million in the state, God, it's still not that huge by then. But it's still meaningful. And that's, it's the goal is to essentially have the majority of new cars that are light duty vehicles, passenger transportation stuff, vast majority of all new sales be all electric or at least clean by 2030.
Right.
So, but there's obviously a transition period based on people's buying habits.
You bet. Yeah. So we're going to need the automakers to make some good cars, so we want to buy them. Right. So we're seeing that at some level. So that's a 10-year goal, and you're thinking even longer term with this pivot. This is not a 10-year pivot. That 10-year mark is kind of a milestone in a grander vision.
Yes, and that's the whole point of the California Mobility Center, is to really accelerate the commercialization of these new technologies. If you think about it, a lot of them will be platforms that software platforms. There's new hardware that needs to be done to accommodate this, and then new testing and new business models. So we really are trying to look at from the broadest extent of where it is and create a wraparound experience for entrepreneurs. They're going to design the future. I'm not going to design it. The innovation is going to come from a place outside of SMUD, but we want to be there early on to be able to take advantage of it, to know what's going on, and to maybe make some strategic investments in it.
So this is sort of a platform for technology to be thrown onto. Now, you've begun to partner. We were talking earlier that you've got these different groups of people, important entities that are partnering alongside you. Can you give us an idea of what this ecosystem sort of looks like?
Sure. We continue to build the number of partners, but we have strong commitments from Sacramento State, for example. President Nelson serves on the CMC board. Sac State's committed 25 acres to develop a mobility innovation park. Los Rios Community College is all in. There's an item on their bond offering that comes in March that would build the initial facility and couple it with workforce training, because if you think about the future of mobility or the future of advanced manufacturing, it requires robotic technicians, and it's a very different than the classic assembly line work. So they've committed to not only help build the building, but also to develop workforce training programs that will meet the needs of entrepreneurs. UC Davis is all in. Greater Sacramento Economic Council is a big supporter of this. And in fact, they see this as one of the 2 or 3 major innovation plays for Sacramento going forward. We have a partner called PIM America, which is a German company that started out of Aachen, Germany, which will do prototyping and advanced manufacturing. They've had a huge amount of success in Germany around this. The importance of prototyping is that we'll have the equipment and really you can do it for about 10% of the cost and 200 times faster than if somebody a startup has to go out and raise the money for their own prototyping equipment. Okay. So it should speed that part of the process along quickly. And then we partnered with Intertech Capital that is really a corporate venture capital company, and they're helping us stand up the venture capital fund. And the first venture capital fund is going to be really focused on corporate, because we quite frankly need those names associated with the center, actually. So,
right. So you're building this ability to have autonomous vehicles in our town. I think a lot of us have a hard time imagining. Well, you jump in a car, and some of the cars today, they sort of help guide you a little bit. So it's a big leap to get them fully autonomous and have them be safe. So that's going to take some time. But Sacramento's position, nobody else is really doing that in the United States. Are they doing it in other countries?
There's testing of autonomous vehicles occurring in other parts of this. There's San Jose is doing some, Phoenix is doing some, Shenzhen, China, which is kind of their Silicon Valley. When I visited it last year, I actually took a ride in an autonomous vehicle, about a 40-minute ride, which I'll tell you gives me makes me think the technology is a lot closer than I thought it used to be.
Okay, so you're in this ride. You're in a 40-minute ride in China.
Yeah, in Shenzhen, China, southern China.
Okay, so you're in China. Is anybody holding the steering wheel just in case?
No,
How did it feel?
He's sitting there in the front seat in case things get crazy, but he never had to touch it.
Okay.
And in fact, let me just say, drivers in California can be a little crazy. Drivers in China are very crazy.
Yes.
So,
I've been there.
So it literally was dealing with people, cutting in front of them and coming down the wrong one-way streets the wrong way. And the car performed beautifully.
Okay.
It was really kind of amazing. I don't think it's quite ready for prime time, but I think, whenever I look at technology, if I think it's 5 years, it's 3 years. If I think it's 3 years, it's,
Right.
18 months. So,
Is
so
China better positioned than us because they, it's you basically have the government that can sort of mandate things.
Yeah.
And you can create a play city. We can just create a city that has no other occupants.
Shenzhen is a perfect example. As I said, it's kind of their Silicon Valley of China. They decided they were going to go all electric. So in 2 years, they changed out every bus and every cab to all electric. 200,000 vehicles in a single year.
Oh, boy.
I'm not supporting autocratic governments at all, but sometimes they can get stuff done that it takes a little longer for those for the rest of us to get done.
Okay, so China, do you see this sort of as a race between us and China? I mean, I know sometimes in like artificial intelligence and other technologies, there is sort of a race.
I think it is kind of a race, but I think when I've talked to automakers and auto suppliers about kind of the industry in general, at the end of the day, China's facing huge pressures from an environmental standpoint. True. And so they are being responsive to the public on that. At the end of the day, they're also the largest market in the world. So their buying power you cannot ignore. And at the same time, they are putting, artificial intelligence is essentially autonomous driving, so they are putting billions of dollars of research into that. So in a bit of a way, I think it is a bit of a race to the finish, but I think this is so big that there'll be multiple players in this in the future. And we tend to focus on autonomous vehicles as thinking about it on the road, but think about the applications off-road for in the agricultural industry. If you've got an autonomous vehicle that actually picks strawberries or does whatever it needs to do, those are applications that are actually easier to implement probably because it's fenced
more
in.
Of a contained
you don't need
environment.
to. You don't need to worry about running over the guy walking across the street.
Sac State has an autonomous vehicle that's running around the Ollie.
They have
Brian
the
and I
Ollie.
rode on that
Yes.
One time. So. Okay, so it's beginning to happen in these more contained environments, and eventually those will prove to be safe, and then we'll see it on the roads at some point.
Yeah, you'll see it on the roads, and again, I think that it's 10 years, 15 years from now, I don't think we'll recognize the transportation world. I think this concept of I need to own my own car there'll be a lot of other business models in there that start to make that less necessary. And you certainly see that in the mindset of, I'm a car guy. When I was 16, my birthday, I went out and got my licenses. Like, it was the most important thing in the world.
Oh, yeah.
My friends who have kids who turn 16, they're like, yeah, I'll get it sometime before I leave for college.
It's interesting. There's a societal change. I wonder how, you think about how that's going to disrupt. So I have like a 68 Camaro, and are people even going to care about having a classic car in 10, 20 years?
I don't know. Will it just be kind of this artifact that
interesting.
you leave parked in the garage that you might not need anymore and are converting to some other use?
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about the opportunity. So, we talked about the different partners that are involved now. So you've got the education led by Sac State in many ways. They're very forward thinking with President Nelson, Davis. But you've got GSAC, you've got the municipalities. Are the different municipalities on board?
So the city of Sacramento is very supportive of this, and I think they're working on allocating some dollars, some early seed money to the CMC. We've got great support from elected officials in Sacramento County. We've even had some conversations with Roseville Electric about this,
great.
who are
Okay.
interested in it, because again, they're a pretty forward thinking utility also. I know their CEO, and I think highly of her. So, and then I'm spending a fair amount of time on the road, reaching out to folks in the industry around joining the CMC.
Okay.
So I was just in Ontario talking to some major auto suppliers about this. I've learned that auto suppliers actually build 90% of the car, and the car companies assemble it like Tinker Toys.
Yes. Okay, so you're bringing in the right players, plus you're bringing in the money. You're creating your own fund. Who's missing? Who do you really need to have jump on board where it would make a huge difference?
So I think I think having your first major auto supplier sign on and firmly commit, having your first major technology company, whether it's Amazon Web Services or somebody like that, sign on, I think are really important. Because that'll be the thing that says, the industry thinks this is something special.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about the entrepreneurial opportunity that something like this will throw off. Along the way, large companies will come in and sort of set the infrastructure, and maybe some of the government agencies and so on will sort of set the infrastructure, but you're creating this fund, and you've described opportunity that'll show up for entrepreneurs. What can you imagine in terms of that?
So I think from from the mobility center, the purpose is to bring under one umbrella the services that startups will need. So whether it's digital expertise or prototyping and advanced manufacturing expertise, help working through the regulatory process in the state of California, and then testing and validation, and then connecting the workforce. If you're a startup, you have to go and find each one of those things on your own. The center will provide a concierge service to take you end to end, to move you through things a lot faster and hopefully less expensive. So if you're coming through the center, we'll have negotiated contracts with all of the service providers. So you'll just move from one to the other as it's needed. You're not going to have to search for it. So I talked to a company in the autonomous space that just had a successful exit out of their fund. And I was talking to the CEO, and he said, you know what I really needed? He said, my biggest struggle was workforce. He said, I needed like a PhD engineer, but I couldn't afford one. And eventually I worked through the university to find one, and I paid him, but I paid him as an intern. That's what was successful, but it took me 4 months to navigate through that process. He said, that delayed my development by 4 months. If between Sac State and Los Rios and UC Davis, we're providing that right up front immediately when you identify your need, you've just saved 4 months. Talked to another, it took his company a year to raise the funds for the prototyping equipment. No investor actually wants to say, let me help you with your prototyping equipment to see if your product actually works. And his prototyping equipment now sits idle 90% of the time. He had to raise more than $1 million for it. If we can get that, you don't even need to do that. All you need to do is, from your investor, raise $100,000 to have the prototyping work done.
Right.
So that's kind of this
Mobility
concept.
Center will concierge service to those.
Exactly. That's the
opportunities.
whole concept. And that's what you're not seeing anywhere else. That's what makes it unique. You're seeing pieces of these things being done elsewhere, but there's not this wraparound service that we hope to offer.
So 25 acres at Sac State. That's the heart of it.
Yes.
That's the location, physical
Yes.
location. Is this a build? That's a lot of land. Is that
Yep.
a big building? What does this facility look like? Help me imagine it.
So it is likely eventually more than one building.
Okay.
It's probably something like a test track also for this, for a new mobility solution. It is probably classroom space because we want to connect the university and its professors. And Los Rios is actually saying we're going to build that building on Sac State property through a
Interesting.
partnership. We're hoping we have the same kind of support from UC Davis so that, we're connecting their students and professors. There's a huge amount of intellectual capital and R&D being done at Davis. That tech transfer from Davis to viable companies, this could be a support for that. So I think there's, a great way to connect all this. Plus, it's in an area that's a disadvantaged community. It's off of Power Inn Road. So, there's space
Is that
around.
adjacent to Sac State? I know Power Inn Road. Is that
It's
a
on
few
the
miles
other
away?
side of the.
Across 50?
Yeah, it's right across from 50. So it's
5 minutes away.
Yeah, it's 5 minutes away. So it's very close. You can run an autonomous shuttle to it from Sac State to
Perfect.
get people there.
Interesting. Okay, so this is really interesting to imagine. It's exciting. You think about as this grows, obviously there's opportunity for people to create businesses, bring their businesses here, and really working on the most cutting edge things. And if we're the only ones really with this facility, this infrastructure, this commitment, how does that position Sacramento and the greater Sacramento region in terms of cutting edge, game changing sort of thinking?
So I think the exciting thing about it is, as you know, the region's really developing a much stronger, more recognized innovation ecosystem. So I think this helps put it on steroids, quite frankly, if we're seen as an innovation hub around new mobility solutions. I think it positions the area really well. You've got Sac State that is saying, we're going to pivot part of our engineering school to support this. So you start to have us seen as a place where you want to locate your business. Clearly, the proximity to the Silicon Valley is important. It's helpful. But we're a lot less expensive place to be, but we'll be creating similar experiences and similar opportunities. So I think it's a place. And then the other thing that I think is the big potential, big important part of this is Sacramento, with the state agencies, with the California Air Resources Board and the Department of Transportation, and the Energy Commission, are really the center of the most progressive policies in the world on these types of issues. So a lot of what's happening is being driven by policy decisions, and that's attractive too, because quite frankly, you've got a lot of buying power with the state and SMUD. And so if we can take some of those entrepreneurs coming here and their technology is proven out and validated, and we can translate that into some purchase orders, that makes Sacramento a really important place for those companies to be.
Yeah, so strategically, Sacramento now becomes very important to an entire industry. How on board? So we know that Sacramento has. You've talked about all the players in Sacramento coming on board, rallying, not seeming to compete with one another, which is great. It's I call it the power of with.
Yep.
If everybody comes together, we can do anything. So it seems to me that it would be highly important to get state government on board, as you mentioned. Are they on board yet?
So
where are they?
Yeah, that's part of the strategy.
Okay.
We figured we needed to have a good story rather than just an idea.
Okay.
So we've got flesh on the bone now. We've got Phil Cerna, who's on the County Board of Supervisors in Sacramento, is also on the CARB board. As is Dan Sperling, who's a leading professor and thinker in transportation policy from UC Davis. So we've met with both of them. They're very supportive of this. We've got we've started to educate members of the legislature on this. We've had some preliminary discussions with the Energy Commission on this. So we're in that process of creating support. This is completely aligned with where the state wants to go.
Right.
So we think they should be big supporters of it, and we expect them to be big supporters because this can quite frankly help the state achieve its aggressive transportation and climate change goals.
Yeah. It's interesting to think there are companies that want to leave California, right? The taxes are high, regulations high, and so on. But this is really a magnet for innovative companies, innovative people from around the entire world. If Sacramento becomes the U.S. Epicenter for this mobility effort, we might be the epicenter for the entire world. Is that a fair statement? I mean, I know China's going ahead of us, but it's
no, I think we will. It is a great platform to become a major player internationally in the new e-mobility space. And I think the fact that we were able to attract a company out of Germany right off the bat who are excited about what we're talking about doing tells me that we've got the right foundation for doing something really exciting for this region. And, it's not just exciting because it's going to grow business. I think we've got strategies where when we think about workforce and trying to solve some of the equity issues around ensuring that people in disadvantaged communities have access to some of these jobs of the future, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities to pipeline people in to what I think are important jobs of the future, and because the world's changing and our skill sets have to change, so we can get ahead of that even.
It's interesting when you think about the innovator's dilemma we talked about at the beginning. Many times these companies that are in the disruption mode, they're the disruptors. They sort of don't view themselves as having competition. We're doing something completely new, and it's going to affect different industries, like Blockbuster got affected by Netflix, which ultimately Netflix becomes something more than DVDs getting mailed around. It became something. So thinking about this in an approach, you got this group of people led by yourself that is doing this. Do you view that you have competition? I mean, when you look at other people in other areas of the world that are attempting to do something kind of like this, are they competitors? What's the attitude?
Well, I think that in some ways, I don't view them as competitors. I view them as complementary. Clearly, we want to attract a big chunk of new business and we want to create opportunity in Sacramento. We want to see economic growth come out of this. But quite frankly, if somebody is doing something cool in Ontario and we can connect with them, and perhaps we do some testing in Ontario because cold weather is different than California weather, and we're feeding talent back and forth between, Ontario's kind of the auto supply center of the world in many ways. If you can start trading back and forth and figuring out how do you complement each other, I think we're all better off at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Well, picture I'm trying to envision have the flights into Sacramento to figure out what's going on in Sacramento. Have they begun? When is this going to be something people can see, feel, touch, and people want to come in and get a piece of this, get absorbed into this thing?
That's a great question. So we're in the forming and storming phase right now, without a doubt. We're moving hard, we're moving fast. We've got a war room set up, the whole kind of things you typically think of. We are hoping that this fall we can roll out what we think is the minimum viable product at the CMC that will have some initial prototyping capacity, and that will be ready to run through our first cohort of applicants to run through it. My concern initially, I just tell you, was we're going to build it and nobody's going to come. None of these startups are going to want to come to Sacramento to do the CMC, that we've missed something important. The truth is we've had more interest from high quality startups from across the country interested in what we're doing than we have capacity in our first cohort.
Wow.
And so some of them have heard through media about us. Others have been referrals from venture capitalists. So we're saying, this might be a good way to get my startup that I've invested in. So there's a lot of interest. So we hope to have that first cohort kind of ready to go before the end of this year, hopefully in the fall.
Okay, well let's describe that cohort. I'm imagining entrepreneurs that are coming in alone or with their team.
Yeah, it's a startup. It's probably not a it's not a company that's been around for a year. It's somebody who's closer to commercialization, but they need to start doing the prototyping. They've been through their Series A, for example, probably.
So they're funded at some level.
They may need their Series B, which perhaps The venture capital fund that we're standing up next to it can support them if necessary. It's not a requirement. It's just a value add. You can bring your own venture funds into the process. And, perhaps you need some prototyping, and then you need testing and validation services. So we would run you through that process. Oh, and by the way, you're also going to need a data scientist or something. And so we connect you up through the workforce chain through the universities. And maybe you just need a few hours of a PhD professor. We hook you up with somebody at Sac State to do that. So that's kind of what you do. You run through it. And because it's predictable and because there's this concierge service, you're moving from one stage to the other seamlessly. You don't have to, as a startup, negotiate a contract with someone. You'll pay to go through it. It's not free, but you have to pay for it anyway.
So walk me through that. If I have this emerging company that's in this space, in the mobility space, I want to come in here to be a part of this. Do I pay cash? Do I give up a piece of my company? What are the economics?
There are different strategies around that. What we hope to do is to have identified the initial service providers. Obviously, we've already, with PIM, have already executed the agreement with them to provide that. You'll provide a fee for that to the service provider. The central the CMC will get a share of that. There are opportunities around, obviously the venture fund would take, if they're interested, would take a position in that company to support it. The lawyers aren't quite through figuring out, is there an opportunity for the CMC to take a share of it if it's interested in a way that would reduce the fees, but...
Okay. So this is kind of like impact investing. You're standing up this fund, and who are the investors of this fund initially? Who's going to throw money in?
So examples. So you could see utilities, because we have a big play in it. Battery manufacturers, because that's an important component of it. OEMs, auto companies, technology companies, oil and gas companies, because...
Yeah, they need to diversify.
They need to diversify, exactly. So those are kind of the initial corporate investors into the fund.
Okay, so it won't be the small-time investor or the small-time venture capital company throwing money in there. This is a long-term play.
This is a long-term play, and really the doing a corporate venture fund first. The rationale behind that is that we really need to get players in this space associated with the CMC. What I would hope is in the future I would really love to have a local venture capital fund that would be that early stage funding, because the corporate venture won't be that, but we will have companies that are earlier stage, that need that $500,000, $400,000 investment. So my hope would be that will develop as kind of a day two activity, so you have you can support a broader spectrum of entrepreneurs.
Okay, so walk us through the next couple of years. How might life change for Sacramentans, for the business community? Can you give us a sense as to what you would see just over the next couple of years?
Well, I think over the next couple of years, we'll continue to expand the product offerings from the CMC. I think you will see some mobility startups choose to locate in Sacramento because of what they're seeing from an innovation space. I think you will see potentially higher profiles in Sacramento from large companies that are associated with it and are either joining the board or part of the venture capital fund. I think you will see the universities pivot some of their educational, some of their training, and whether it's the engineering schools or computer science or business schools, to look at this as creating a linkage to what is clearly an important industry going forward.
I would think so. I really get excited about the young people being excited. I get excited about them being excited about staying in Sacramento and going to Sac State, going to UC Davis because they want to be part of this revolution, if you will, and maybe people from around the country sending their kids here to go to school.
Well, and the big thing is when you're a startup, or even if you're a large company, you look at it, the most important thing and the biggest challenge is where can you acquire the talent?
Yeah.
If Sacramento, the region, is providing the talent in a very focused way, in a focused industry application, you will see growth here, I think. So I think that's part of and because of that, young people will come here. Importantly, they'll go to school here and they'll stay here. They won't feel like they've got to go off to Silicon Valley or Austin or something like that. So that's what I'm really excited about.
Okay, Arlen, we only have a minute or so left. Maybe you can give us some closing thoughts. What else we didn't cover that's important for us to know that we need to be thinking about for the Mobility Center and for SMUD, generally speaking. So I'm just going to toss it over to anything that we want to make sure that Sacramento entrepreneurs, Sacramento small business people might want to have on their mind.
Yeah, I would just say I think the California Mobility Center is an incredible opportunity for our region to really help redefine who we are. I think Aggie Square is another huge opportunity when you think about these innovation hubs that are very focused on a specific area, whether it's healthcare or ag or transportation. I think creating that kind of a reputation for our region will drive business here, even if they don't take advantage of the center, because I think we'll have developed a reputation around that. That's what I'm so excited about. I think the opportunities for young entrepreneurs in Sacramento are going to grow dramatically over the next 5 years, and especially in the mobility space.
Yeah, exciting stuff. Arlen Orchard, he is the CEO of SMUD. He is the man behind this big effort towards mobility and putting Sacramento on the map in this space. Thanks for what you're doing for our hometown.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for watching today's show. My goal for every episode is that you find a takeaway, something tangible you can use in your business today. And if you have a comment about a favorite takeaway, feel free to put it in the box below. And if you have a topic that you'd like me to bring up on the show, don't forget to let me know. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to learn more about entrepreneurship. Because at Haney Biz, we are always by your side.